Welcome, everyone.
Mhm.
Really very excited to see you all here. So, I thank you all for signing in for today's session and super excited to introduce you to our very special guest for today, Paula Lillard Preschlack. Paula was a teacher and the head of school at Forest Bluff School for over 25 years. She has given over 100 talks at Forest Bluff, other Montessori schools, teacher training courses, and conferences. Her work focuses on the principles and benefit of the Montessori approach. Paula attended Hampshire College and holds a master's degree in education from Loyola College in Maryland, has diplomas from the Association Montessori International for assistance to infancy, primary, and elementary levels, and she audited the NAMTA AMI orientation to adolescent studies. Paula is married to Jim Preschlack and has two adult children. Wow. She loves horses, standard poodles, nature, hiking, skiing, reading, and laughing really hard with her friends. What you don't do, Paula, please let us know. It's so amazing to know about things that you do other than Montessori. So,
Oh,
so here we are about a little brief introduction about you, Paula. But I know you have a very wonderful family history. So tell us a little more about you and your family.
okay. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much, Madhuri, for having me. This is really a gift and so much fun to connect with everybody. It's a Saturday morning here in Illinois, in the United States, and it's very hot. And I was telling Madhuri we started the day riding horses. So I I have gotten my exercise in, and I'm just so excited to be with all of you here today. So thanks for coming. I would start with my family by talking about my mother. She's Paula Polk Lillard, and she got into Montessori because she had five daughters, five children, and one of the classrooms where two of my sisters were turned into a Montessori classroom in at Cincinnati Country Day School. And my mother became the assistant because she wanted to see what Montessori was. And she was amazed. So that was her first introduction really to Montessori. And she taught she was an assistant to Hilda Rothschild was the teacher. And she became the first trainer at the AMS Center in Xavier. They started that training center at that time. This was in the 1960s. And then my family moved to Chicago. One of my oldest sisters, Lynn Jessen, got her Montessori training as well. My mother did get her AMI training later to be primary trained. My sister, Lynn Jessen, got her training at primary and assistance to infancy level with AMI. And she and my mother co-founded a school and started Forest Bluff School, which is still going. My sister, Lynn, has taught at the school and worked at the school this whole time. My mother as well has stayed involved, and my sister is now the head of school. And for myself, I watched them grow this school when I was a teenager and through my 20s, and I became a Montessori teacher. I got my elementary, primary, all my trainings, as Madhuri just said, and I came and started teaching at the school. And then later was the head of the school, had my own children. And I do have another sister, Angela Lillard, who is a researcher, and she is a child developmental researcher at University of Virginia. And she got interested in Montessori when her two children were little, and she put them in a Montessori school. And as she was watching it, she was seeing it from a different perspective and seeing, wow, this is really really interesting, and I'd like to do some research on Montessori. So my sister Angela kind of came in to the family with the research background, and two of Lynn's daughters actually became AMI Montessori trained as well. Margaret Kelly, who's now an adult, she has all three trainings and taught at Forest Bluff for a while. Her children go there. And my niece, Paula Elliott, just had a baby, but she did her 0 to 3 training as well. So many people in our family are involved in Montessori. And my father always used to joke about that because we would talk about it so much when we were together. But that's a bit of the family history there.
Oh my God, that's a lot. Lot and way back into Montessori as well. It's not just many people being Montessori trained, but it's also way back. Your mother is now 19, you were just telling me. And
She's
yeah, she must
she's
be around 60 years into
she's
Montessori.
92. She's 92 and she started in Montessori in her 30s. So yeah, really long time, taught for ages and ages. She taught primary classroom for ages and ages, and she wrote 4 books. So many people know her name around the world for writing those 4 books. So that's Montessori: A Modern Approach, which was in 1972, Montessori in the Classroom, which was a teacher's diary of teaching, Montessori Today, and Montessori from the Start, which she co-wrote with my sister, Lynn Jessen.
Yeah, yeah, and I refer to Montessori from the start because I'm a 0 to 3 trained adult, so it's very helpful, very helpful. So, Paula, you yourself has become a great, famous author, I would say, recently. You just published your book last year, The Montessori Potential. And would you like to let us know what motivated you to write this book?
I think I was motivated to write. I love writing. It's something I've always loved to do. Not that I don't find it challenging, but I enjoy it. Um, I kept finding that as heads of schools, as Montessori teachers, as Montessori parents, we all were having the same conversations, and so often the same things were coming up. We were saying we are so frustrated that people don't really understand what Montessori is. And we're so frustrated that people don't understand the differences between what they might see as being called Montessori and what is true Montessori. So I really wanted to write something that would help people to understand that, somebody who knew nothing about Montessori to really be able to walk away from the book saying, now I get it, and to have more people out there who understand the potential and how amazing Montessori is. I mean, so many of us see in our graduates and in our own children how incredible this experience is for them. But to translate it to other people can be challenging. So I was really driven for that reason to write this.
Yeah. So, Paula, we have so many Montessori books around, right? What makes your book different from, those already existing Montessori books? What are the practical takeaways? I know we were discussing, and you told me earlier that you have focused more on the practical aspect of understanding what Montessori is rather than just theory.
Mm.
So, what else can you talk about that differentiates your book from the others?
Yeah, I really wanted people to be able to see what it looks like without having to be in a room, but to feel like they're really there and to understand how the theory manifests in the practice. So what it looks like and how what you see is connected to the theory. So I haven't really seen anybody do that before in their books. So I worked hard to try to create those scenes so that a person could read that and everyone will take away something different from the book. But I do think it has a lot of practical suggestions that different people will read and see different things in it. Somebody might read it and get excited about the suggestion of having the book discussions as a team of teachers once a week and take that little practical piece of advice. Another might, read the description of a teacher giving a presentation to a child in a primary classroom and really see some of the steps and realize, oh, I'm missing some of those steps, or oh, now I understand why that's so important to turn from the shelf that way, or give the child a chance with that. So people will get different things out of the book. But I wanted it to feel alive and really bring the reader into the room so they would feel like they could see why it's so special, and why and how this happens, how this really works.
Yeah.
So many people say Montessori is great and it works, but then we have to be able to show why
Absolutely.
and how it's doing that.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you have given them logical reasons for why one must do a certain thing and not just
Mhm.
about what they must do. Because most of the books will talk about what they are supposed to do, but why they are supposed to do is something that we fail to understand. And this is why I have also seen the rigidity, because people know, oh, this is what is supposed to be done, but then when to stop and when not to is only because they have no understanding of why this must be done, isn't it?
Mhm. Yes, you're so right. Mhm.
So, you being an author, you had an experience. I know that you finished your book in 6 years.
Mhm.
What would you suggest to some of the aspiring authors?
Oh, I think we need more books and more writing about people's experiences in Montessori for sure. Um, I found it hard to be patient and to try to find, it was a really interesting experience when you have something that you've written that you want people to read. Then there's the whole aspect of why would they want to read it and trying to meet the audience where they are. So kind of think of it as the equivalent of trying to go into a parent teacher conference and starting to talk at the parents, and they can't really hear you because they have something else on their mind. So we have to understand the audience first. And so there was a long process for me of trying to understand what words and what phrases and what stories are going to connect with an audience, and having the patience and the persistence to keep changing what I had to meet that need that people have. There's no point in writing something people aren't going to read it. I mean, to me, if you want to make a difference. So that was a long and a big learning process for me, and took a lot of showing it to different people and asking them to give their opinions, and sometimes taking feedback that was kind of hard to take. But I always wanted to grow, and I just felt so determined to make it better and to get it to where it needed to be, without sacrificing the message that I wanted to give. It really was important to me to have all the sections in the book that I have. I got a lot of feedback at times to take things out. I took some things out, but I refused to take out certain things. I was like, okay, there's got to be another way to make these points connect with my main point, because to me they do. And I have to make it so other people see and understand why these things connect, because Montessori is a whole interwoven system that's natural. It's not these bits and pieces. That's why it's hard when you see a school that is taking bits and pieces of Montessori and trying to put it in. It doesn't work that way. It's the whole thing. So I wanted the book to feel that way, that all these aspects of Montessori are important. I couldn't put everything in, but I really wanted some main points to be in there. So that's why it took so long to work on that. So my advice to somebody who is aspiring to write would be not to give up and to keep working on it and to believe in it. There are ways to make that happen. I hope more will do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. And then we have Paula here to guide us whenever. Yeah. So Paula,
Well, maybe not to guide, but to cheer you on. I will cheer you on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's enough. So, Paula, what you said just now is so true that the schools should understand that it's just not bits and pieces, but it's the whole of Montessori that we have to you know accept, inculcate, and abide by, follow it. So
Mhm.
my next question would be, what do you think? What is the difference between a Montessori school and a traditional kindergarten? And
Mm.
what should a school founder, the people who are the promoters of the school, what should they keep in mind to ensure that they are not, taking in bits and pieces, but they are putting in everything, adhere to all the Montessori principles to make it as authentic as possible.
Yeah. Okay. There's sort of two parts to that question in my mind, and the first that jumps out to me is this: what makes Montessori so different is that Montessori is an approach. It's a whole way of seeing children and a whole way of being with them and a whole way of interacting with them. And so every decision in the school should reflect that vision and that approach. So the materials that are chosen to put in the room, the activities that are chosen to present to the child, the way you do everything should be connected. And that should be true really of any school, just like any business. Any business should be connected to its mission and its values. And so a Montessori school really needs to be very grounded in that. Um, I think the other part of your question, what's the difference with traditional kindergarten? I think what most parents would notice is that traditional kindergarten is very much focused on group activity. So there's one teacher, but there's group activities. So a lot of time spent in a group where children are doing the same activity. They're all shown how to do it, but they all do it together. And what Maria Montessori saw was that when children are very little, under age 6, they're the moments when they really concentrate and they're really truly learning is when they are engaged in something that is deeply interesting to that individual. And that's always going to be something different for different people in the same moment. I mean, we're all born with this natural drive to find something we're very, very interested in and to be different from each other. So Montessori celebrates the individual and the individual growth within community. So the community is very important. It's a very important part of it, but everyone has some choice and some freedom to be getting into that deeper flow and concentration at the same time. And kindergarten, you're going to see they're constantly, the adult is trying to pull the attention collectively, right? So I think that's the main difference.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And one thing that I also see is like, few people will have this confusion, I would say, that if each child is doing their own activity in a community, then when are they doing a group activity? Because that is also equally important for their social growth.
Yes.
Right? So I think
Yes.
here in Montessori, children are following their inner drive and they are taking up their own, things or activities or whatever they choose on their own and work on it, and that develops their concentration, their confidence, their independence. Whereas in traditional school, I personally am experiencing as well lately that children are mostly doing group activities or having those group lessons. Some of them are not interesting to them, but they have to, where they have more of group activities and less of individual work, and that kind of becomes mundane after a while. Don't you
Mhm.
think so? That Paula?
Yes. Yes. And I also think so. And what you get too is when you try to give a group presentation, and it's not that we never do in Montessori, there are times when we're speaking to the whole group, of course, but when you try to hold that attention for a long time, children start, you get behavior issues because they can't, they're not all engaged at the same level. But what I'd like to say is I recently had a great experience of going back into Forest Bluff School. It always refreshes me to go back into Forest Bluff School and observe. And I went the last couple of weeks, I spent 2 mornings where I watched. And what you see is that there will be a child. So one day there was a child who came in and he greeted the teacher, and then he stood and he watched what the children were doing with the teacher. She was working with 2 or 3 children. And he watched for a long time. And then he walked over to the window and looked out the window. And then he came and stood by another child and watched what they were doing. And then he talked to someone for a moment. And then so he was constantly searching, but picking up so much information about the way he was learning so much by watching his children. And then he chose something, but it took quite a while. It was maybe 20 minutes of watching and absorbing and talking to children and interacting with them, and not in an invasive way, but he was socializing. So a lot of learning happens when children have that movement, that freedom of movement. Another, I just remember seeing so many where a child would be working on something and then they would look up and they would watch somebody else or watch 2 children. We had cicadas here. We had the 17-year cicadas emerging this summer. And so there was a lot about the cicadas. So 2 children had gone outside and the patio was open, and maybe a 5-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy, they were sweeping cicadas and picking up cicadas and talking about them. So this girl had her workout, but she was watching them for a while. Then she went back to her work. Somebody came over and talked to her. She went over and talked. So there's a lot of socializing and social learning that's happening in Montessori. It's just a more individual path.
It reminds me of my daughter when she was in primary environment, and she had recently joined maybe for a few months, probably. The first meeting that I had with the teachers, the adults in the environment, they told us she stands and she just watches other children work. And it seems like she is procrastinating her work, her individual work, but what was happening was she was processing all the presentations that was given to other children, and when her time came, it was like snap of a finger. She knew exactly what to do even before the presentation was given.
Yeah.
Also interesting thing was that when teachers would give her presentation, when adults would sit with her and give a presentation, her face will be absolutely uninterested. She will be looking somewhere else, and not at all.
Oh.
It will never feel like she is looking at or listening to what the aunties are saying. And then when the moment the adults will move away, she is doing everything on her own. So it's very surprising. And then you will see some children completely focused and engrossed in their work. So as you said, it's definitely an individual path, and it is also individual personality, which is respected in a Montessori environment, irrespective of whether they are, taking time or they are looking distracted. But we give them that respect, that time, and see how they are, processing their work and doing things on their own. That is what helps them flourish into a new human being, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that story and that example because it just goes to show in other school settings, children are punished or rewarded for their personality, for how they're interacting. But when they're allowed in Montessori to be who they are,
Yeah.
their strengths come out and their individual strengths come out. And that's why we see these incredible young adults. So I've been, I was started teaching in the early 1990s. So many of my students now are adults. They're in their 20s, they're in their 30s. They're getting married, they have their professions, and I see how amazing they are. They really have become themselves, like whatever truly that person is meant to be. And what greater gift could there possibly be? It's just, that's why I wanted to write the book. I just kept saying they can't just be unusual human beings. They are unusual because they were allowed to become their true selves. And everybody else has this potential too. Everybody else could do this too.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So, moving on to our interaction, I would like to know, for the schools, um, we have different kinds of parents, and they have different kinds of backgrounds. They come from different backgrounds, and it can be very conventional or non-conventional. So, what should schools keep in mind when they're interacting with these parents? I remember you giving me an example of a parent who was confused about, had no idea about what his child is doing, right? So,
Mhm.
what exactly we have to understand about the parent and then interact with them.
That's a great question. I taught for quite a while and learned the hard way with parents. We often say as teachers and administrators that the parents are the harder part. The children are easier for us, and the parents are the harder part. Um, but just as we observe the children to try to understand them before we give a presentation, it's really important to have the time and the opportunities to get to know the parents as people also. And that could be just asking a few questions. It could be spending time around them in different settings. But to truly try to understand what motivates this mother or father, where are they coming from? How are they thinking? I often ask people, what's the most important thing to you about your child, or what do you want them to get out of this school? Why did you choose this school? Really try to understand that first, because once I started to realize that that was the most important part of our conversation, I found that it was much easier and much quicker to say the thing that would help them understand what I was trying to say. So I can think of one turning point that comes to me. Um, a parent whose child was doing beautifully. The child had a lot of struggles, but she was doing so well in my classroom. She was 5 years old. The parents acted like they loved the school. Everything was great. Everything was always wonderful. We got along. We didn't really have to talk a lot. Because everything was going so smoothly. And we sat down for a parent-teacher conference, and I told them how wonderfully their daughter was doing. I showed them the work and everything. And then they said, "This is really great. We've decided to take her to traditional school for first grade." I was shocked. And then I could have just, gotten upset, but I really didn't understand. And I spent the next maybe 10 minutes asking them questions. And I spent all the time I possibly could asking questions until I was really sure that I understood where they were coming from and why they were thinking this way. And then I spoke exactly to their concerns and said, here's why Montessori is going to be a better fit, for a better way to get your daughter to where you'd like her to be than moving her to a traditional school. And we talked for much longer than the meeting was supposed to, but they not only stayed, they stayed all the way through the 8th grade. And she has been one of the best examples I can think of a young person who found herself, gained confidence in her abilities, even though she had struggles with language. And she just became such a superstar. And she did that herself because Montessori supported her at each of the ages. But I don't know what would have happened to her if she'd gone to traditional school. So I was really grateful for that moment that for whatever reason, I sat back and just started asking questions. And that taught me to always do that, to ask a lot of questions first.
That's so beautiful. So what you did basically is with asking question first of all, you help them unload themselves with all the insecurities or doubts or apprehensions they were having for the school and the system probably, and you built that trust is why they continued with you. So yeah, that's a very great example, Paula, about when we interact with parents, it shouldn't come from we are school and you are parents and you don't know and I know, but it should be about we
Yes.
are in this together and we need to have the trust so that we can support the child fully, holistically, isn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
right. I think too, it's so important to remember is we're just not always going to say the same thing to every parent for each situation. And that's what makes it hard about giving talks and having people ask you questions sometimes is that they'll ask a question about what should I do about this with my child, and it's very hard to answer without knowing all the details and all the background. But I've been in situations where I've said to a parent something I would not say to another parent, but it's because of the situation that they're in and the relationships and their extended family and all kinds of things. What's right for one might not be for another. And sometimes, just anything that's going to be helpful to them, you can't know unless you understand better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And spending time is like you spend 10 minutes talking to them is what made that difference. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Taking the time. And often when you do that up front, like the beginning of the school year, if you're teaching, if you spend more time making more phone calls after school to just drop a phone call and say, oh, your child had the most amazing day. He did blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And it was this beautiful moment with such and such. And just a little tiny thing, you're just giving them the confidence and the trust. And it's worth spending more time in the beginning. And sometimes that pays off not only with that child for those 3 years, but sometimes then you'll teach a sibling and then another sibling. And so that parent gets easier and easier to work with because you put so much time and energy in the beginning. So it's very worth it. And also to always assume that even the most confident seeming parent is having a lot of struggles at home. We those of us who are parents understand that it's so hard, and they need a little phone call now and then. They need a little pep talk. They need some encouragement, and it doesn't have to be this big reveal. It just can be a little tiny moment. Your child did this today. And sometimes when you haven't heard from them in a long time and you think the parent is fine and everything is fine, that can sometimes be the most important time to throw that out there and just make sure they understand how much you care. Because I don't think most parents have any idea how much the teachers think about their children or how much time we spend trying to figure their children out, and how much effort we put into making everything work with them, and how well we know them, how much we care and love them. I think many parents imagine that, the teacher is just not even looking at their child, doesn't care, doesn't see. And it really makes a difference when we can show that.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. This happened in my toddlers community, and there was this new child, and I think she was in a joint family, and mother would never leave the child at home, probably. So this child was extremely clingy, and this was just post-COVID. So we were allowing parents also inside the environment, sitting in one place, and the child would work in the environment. Now, this child always wanted to work where her mother would be sitting, very close to, in the vicinity of where the mother was sitting. And we kept trying the child to go a little away. We will encourage her to come inside the environment, choose some material, sit there itself, but it was not working. And what we observed was the mother was very engaging. She kept teaching us
Mhm.
what we must do. when the child is upset. So eventually, what happened was the child figured that every time I do not want to do a certain thing, my mother will become my advocate and will start speaking on my behalf. And yes, in the environment, adults start judging the parent because the parent is herself very insecure or maybe too clingy for the child. But what we realized, what we discussed was, I told them that we cannot think this way. Maybe she is also coming from some kind of mindset that we don't know. So let us speak. And then what we started doing was, she was scared that the child will cry. So what we started doing was, every day we started with a plan, and we will tell her first thing in the morning, this is what we are going to do with your daughter, and these are the things. So you stay here, just be there like a statue, be mom. Even if she's coming to you, you just watch her, but do not talk. Acknowledge that you are there, but do not talk. And that plan every day started working. So the mother also gained a bit of confidence in us because she knew exactly what was expected out of the day, and it made her more calm and she could hold herself. So I totally understand what you are saying, and especially with younger ones, it's even tougher because they are coming into the environment for the first time and they are too young and too vulnerable. So parents are equally anxious. So
Mm.
yeah, to have that connect with the parent is so imperative at this age. Yes, and in any age, I feel we can work with the children only when we can work successfully with the parents.
Yes. And
Yes,
it makes a difference if it's the first child as opposed to the third or fourth child that
yes,
they've had. And
yeah,
sometimes I've found a big reveal is if someone's really protective of their child or really closely connected or really worried about them a lot, sometimes I'll find out they had a very difficult time conceiving or having that child, or that child fought for its life for the first 2 months and almost died. You know, when you learn things like that, it just gives you a different perspective. Like, oh, no wonder you're so attached or so fearful or giving these signals.
right.
It's usually coming from a good place.
Yes.
But that's beautiful that you were able to help her with that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what you said exactly. This is what I had to say, that no parent thinks bad about the child.
Mhm.
They want to give the best. It's just that they don't know what they are giving is the best or not. So we are the ones, we have to tell them, help them understand this. So
Sometimes we're more objective.
yes, yes. And sometimes we have to as well, right? So we are talking about parents and to be on the same page with the parents. As we are discussing, Paula, that it's a collaborative work, right? Both parents have to work and the child as well. Most of the times, the concerns that parents have is, how can I support my child so that they can become good at problem solving, critical thinking. What can help them become independent and boost their self confidence, self esteem. So mostly because they don't know what to do at home. So, what do you suggest these parents that will help them support their children at home, and also let us know some of the examples that you might have given in your book as well, so that they might go and refer to your book.
Yes, for sure. So I tried to break Montessori down into something that people could understand. So in the book, I talk about, if I had to explain Montessori in a nutshell to someone, I would say, and I came up with this because I kept giving these talks for a program we call Montessori from the Start at Forest Bluff School. And it was to the parents of the youngest children and infants. And I found that every fall, I would start out by talking about the environment again. And then the next talk I would give about the adult, and then the next one about freedom and responsibility. And then in the next fall, I would start again. And I kept coming back to these three things. And I thought, if people can really go back to those three things with whatever question they have, they're going to be able to make sense and stand back and be a little more independent and think for themselves of how they might help their child at home, because it's in the classroom and it's at home. It's everything. And in the book, chapter 6, the very last chapter, is about home life. So I take this structure and then talk about how you would apply that at home, what it's going to look like at home compared to at school. So I think the most important things for a parent to think of with Montessori is, first, it's a paradigm shift. You know, in our cultures, we often think of children as being almost like clay that needs to be molded or created by the parent, or guided or fixed or changed in some way, or built by the parent. And you notice this in our language. People will say, I want my child to take soccer. We are applying to this college. I mean, they really, we do it.
Yeah.
And it really gets in the child's way. So the paradigm shift in Montessori is to realize this human being, like any creature, is forming themselves. And they form themselves. They are creating a person through their interaction with their surroundings and the people around them. They're creating themselves. And they're going to do that no matter what we do. They're going to touch things and grab things and put them in their mouths and try to crawl. They're going to do this. So as they follow those natural urges that are it's going to give them information to build themselves with, we adults are sort of standing on the side helping. So our job is to assist and help and not to do the forming. So that gives you a clue right there that when you think about independence or self-confidence, if you are really looking at your child as someone who's forming themselves and you're not doing it, you can't make them confident, you can't make them happy, but you can provide an environment, set up the environment so that they can get something themselves, they can climb up here, they can collaborate with you, clearing the table or making the food or making their bed or putting on their clothes. So that confidence is a natural byproduct of the way that you're interacting with them and the way you're treating them as their own forming person. So that paradigm shift, the fact that the child is forming themselves, is the first big thing. And then I think of these 3 pillars. The first is the prepared environment. So we can always, every time we have a question, we can go back to the environment. Well, did I set it up so the child could succeed? Is it set up so that it's frustrating? Or did I set it up to keep the child from climbing on that, or making it so that the thing I don't want them to do is not an option? You know, physically, can I change the environment? The next is the adult. So how am I modeling? How am I interacting? Am I going around doing these things that I keep seeing them do? They're imitating me. So how am I? And so often as parents, and for me as a parent especially, and my children are now in their 20s, and I have to remind myself of this at least twice a week. Don't tell them what to do or how to live. Just live your own life, and they will see. And that is so key. So when you carry the plate with 2 hands, the little children will start to carry the plate with 2 hands. When you walk slowly across the room, the children will start to walk slowly. When you wait until the person stops talking instead of interrupting, they will start to. So that adult piece is so important, to really be self-aware as an adult. And the third pillar is freedom and responsibility. And that is hard for people to understand, because most people did not grow up with freedom and responsibility. And so for most of us, we don't even know what it looks like. We can't imagine. So it's been so interesting giving talks to parents and looking at their faces and seeing them try to understand, what do you mean? I'm going to let them do everything? I'm going to let them do nothing? You know, they have a really hard time understanding that balance. So what I talk about is, think of the freedom as being choices. It doesn't mean you can do anything you want. It just means that there are three choices here, or there might be two choices of what to do. And the responsibility part, think of it as the boundaries. So we give choices and we give boundaries or limits. So the limit might be physical in the room. The limit might be kind of like a guidance. We don't climb on tables. We don't sit on tables. We just don't. Tables aren't made for that. That might be a limit or a boundary for a child. But within that, they have a choice. They can sit on the floor or in the chair. So that balance, the more we give children those things, the more independence, self-confidence, problem-solving, critical thinking you're going to see. So I hope that answers your question.
So what you're saying is be the role model for your child so that what you expect, they themselves follow, and give them autonomy, right? Rather than telling them what to do. And this is not just in the home environment. In school environment as well, I have seen in many places that it's so common to, without even knowing, subconsciously, you just go and say, don't do this, rather than we are not going to do this for so and so reason. We don't say that. We right away stop them by saying, you can't do this, go there, or sit there, sit quietly, don't talk, eat your food, finish your work, wind up your work, whatever. So I think the language is also important when we are giving them freedom and responsibility, because sometimes people think discipline means stop them from doing something,
Yes.
restrict them, and freedom means just let them do whatever they want. So that
Right.
fine balance, that fine balance is so important. And I think it is possible only when we observe the reaction or the response when we are doing something, either it backfires or it works, right? So how do you suggest, like I keep saying people, we were discussing the other day also, that people watch rather than observe. How do we make them understand watching your child is different from observing your child?
Hmm. Well, I think that observing, and I'm going to talk about it on a high level here because we're not in a Montessori training, training people to be teachers. But if we're just talking about parents and adults in general, observing means slowing down so you can really see, slowing down, being aware. So being aware and responding, being responsive, responding to what you're seeing, and realizing that all of this that you're talking about is a conversational dance back and forth between the child and the adult. And you want that dance to continue. You don't want to stop like an obstacle to stop it. You need it to go somewhere. So I work with horses, so I think sometimes of this analogy. In the book, I use the analogy of a river, like the power of the river that's just like the child's force, the life force in the child is going to go somewhere. And you can't just make it stop. So you have to think creatively of how to guide that energy to keep and allow it to keep going, but to do something positive with it. With a horse, you're on a 2,000-pound animal. You cannot force them to do something that they don't want to do. And if they are afraid of something, you have to take all that energy and try to get them to do something positive with it so you don't get hurt. And with children, when it comes to discipline, I think this is a very interesting topic because, as you say, Madhuri, I've seen people in classrooms, shush, 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 and trying to control children and giving them lists of things to do, especially in the elementary levels. And they just take all of the spontaneity and interest and the power that the child has out. It's like snuffing a candle. But instead of that, again, this came to me the 4th year I was teaching in primary. I finally kind of turned a corner of realizing I can say, I can insist that a child not do something without getting mad or upset or super firm. I can do it in a pleasant way. And that was like a real revelation for me when I finally realized what made me able to do it was confidence. So that I think is the difference. When you see a teacher who's been teaching for a long time and they're confident and they know, it's like the mother with the 4th child. She knows that this is the right thing for the child. So the way her whole body and her attitude gets the child to stop doing what they're doing and to do something else translates that confidence. It's hard when you're maybe a first-time teacher or a young parent, or you're doing anything that you haven't done before. It's hard to have that confidence. But if you can be very sure of just a few things, you don't have to be sure of everything, but if you choose, just a few things that you really care about, that you're going to be insistent about, and you can insist in a very pleasant way. You can say, we're not going to do that. We're going to come over here and do this. And the child is much more likely to come with you and to respond if you are smiling and confident and you're not bothered by what they're doing. I'll give an example. I think one of the things that Montessori gave us that's a huge gift is the clue that work is the answer. When a child is absorbed and intrigued and gets hooked on something and their attention gets zeroed in on something, their whole personality settles. They can hear you differently. Everything changes. And she saw that moment happen over and over and over and over again. And that's what we're trained to try to see as Montessori educators. When is that moment? What is the thing that will grab this particular child? So when there's misbehavior or a child isn't working or you have any kind of issue, it's about intriguing them and sprinkling out these options for them. Maybe it's just one option or 2 options, but trying to find what are they going to attach to. So that's very important. But the one other thing I wanted to say in response to what you just said is that we have a teacher at our school, Haley Tate, who's been teaching for, oh boy, maybe going on 40 years. She's amazing. She works with children who are 18 months to 3 years old. And that woman smiles pretty much all morning with those children. And I watch her with chaos happening, child drops something, there's water all over the floor. I mean, when you're working with very little children, it can be sometimes really, really challenging. And she just stays so steady, but she keeps connecting them to the environment. And she says things like, oh, my friend, let's come over here with me. Walking feet, we use walking feet. Our feet are walking, so she uses the positive, like what to do, not what she doesn't say stop running, and she doesn't say stop hitting. She says, oh, my friend, come with me, takes their hand very gently and firmly. We're going over here now. I see you're finished with this. And she takes the material up. But because she does it in that way, they are so drawn to her, and it keeps the energy going forward. That positive energy can keep going. She takes the negative energy and helps to swoop it into something positive. And she's just a master. We actually have another teacher at our school who's really fairly new, and she just started with children that age, and she picked up on that. And so I was watching her in her classroom the other day, and I said, wow, I just want to sit here all day long and watch you, because your language, things are falling, child is, all these things are happening. And she's just, oh, my friend, come here. we see this. Yes, that is a cicada. So she's giving language, she's giving presentations, but she's doing it. She's stopping things from happening that are destructive. She's stopping things that should not be happening, but she's doing it in such a way that is deliberately forward thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, this answers the question I had from one of the audience, how to handle the initial chaos in the classroom, and you have answered really well. I love the
yeah.
example. Yes, we need to have positive phrases for children rather than having these, assertive ones where we are saying stop doing this or stop going there or don't do this. Yeah, it makes so. I think when we are using the word no, the our um, our brain works in a way which gets into that fight and flight mode, and it's like, oh no, no means danger, and I don't have to listen to this. So it actually works in the opposite way rather than making it more constructive for the children, right?
Yes, and if you can set up your environment and interact with the children in such a way and give choices and responsibilities in such a way that you don't have to say no very often, because they're constantly telling them they can't do anything. So no means nothing to them. It's like, yeah, that's basically the but don't do that. And it's one of the only times you ever say it, they realize, oh, wow. And they respect it. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's helpful to
Yeah.
people.
So I think we are close to the conclusion of our session, and I would like if any of our people
Yeah.
here have any questions to ask. Paula is very happy to answer. In fact, we are eagerly waiting for your question.
Yes. I would love any questions because it makes it more alive, and what is on your mind might not be something that we talked about.
Yes.
I see a hand up.
Yeah, we have Demi. So yeah, Demi, please go ahead and ask the question.
Thank you so much for this presentation, both of you. And I had my camera on all the time, so I hope that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I was wondering, would you give exactly the same advice to a parent who has a special needs child regarding the prepared environment? How is the adult modeling and the freedom and responsibility? I would guess most of the factors will remain the same. Perhaps they might even be more important for such a child and such a family, but it could be that some factors you would perhaps formulate differently. So thank you so much for your answer.
That's a great question. And more we're seeing the need for being sensitive to different situations people are coming from. And it's all the same in terms of observing, being aware, responding. That's a situation where you would bring in more tools or more information that's going to be specific to that child, but you're still working with the same framework. That human being is still forming themselves. It's important to help them in every way that we can to do that. We're going to look at the environment. We're going to work with that environment and set up that environment and prepare that environment as best as we can. We're going to model as adults, and we're going to collaborate with them. And it's just like any child, and they will respond differently, perhaps, but they will respond. They're human beings. And these are really, really important basics. And I think one gift that Montessori gave us too is the long-term thinking, really looking into the future. Who is this person going to be when they're 25 years old? And I think it's a very hopeful way of looking at children. They will not always be the way they are in this moment today. And we have to just keep working up that hill every single day that we have to maybe present the same sandpaper letters over and over and over and over in all the different ways that we can. I think sometimes teachers can get discouraged too quickly or think that there's something going on because the child didn't get it. A lot of repetition through variety, and it's really important to keep that going in classrooms. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
I have a short follow-up, if I may. And I guess communication and collaboration with the parents might become even more important in that case.
Yes, and you need to find out what's working at home. I think that when a child has greater needs, it's always still important to remember that independence is the goal. So that child might need more assistance and more help, but it's really important to keep in mind that what you want is for that child to be able to think for themselves and function on their own and be able to physically function. And so I think in Montessori, we're more sensitive to that. And sometimes, although those are the same goals in traditional special education, they're the same goals, but sometimes someone is coming from a place where they're so focused on giving a lot of supports that they miss the moment that was right to take the support away and let the child take some steps on their own or be a part of the solution. So I'll just give you one example because I've seen this a lot. One thing that's very common or popular is using cue cards for children. So a child who's having trouble processing or having trouble remembering the steps and so on, having cue cards around the classroom that shows them what to do or reminds them what to do, a picture or whatnot. But not realizing that, there's a point where you can take that away. And if you miss that moment, the child, so is there a moment when the child could draw the cue card, where the child could say the cue card, where the child could? So watching for that, and remembering that even when a child has greater needs, they're still on a path. There's an upward path. It's not stagnant. It's not linear. So I hope that's helpful. And working with the parents, yes, and helping them to understand that we want to help the child get to be as independent as they possibly can at whatever age, whatever is appropriate for them. Yeah, somebody else had a question over here.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Yasmin.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, Madhuri. Hi, Paula. I have just a question. Like in EC classrooms, the child should be there for 3 years, from 3 to 6 years, right? But what we have observed that at the age of 5, the parents, they just want to shift their kids to the traditional school rather than to continue for another year. So this is because we are not able to convince them, or they are not able to understand the Montessori environment, that the child should be there for the 3 years in the same class. In this way, we miss our students going for the elementary level, lower elementary.
A way of helping with that is from the time their child is 3, be showing the parents in little presentations the materials that they will get to see when they are 5, and explaining to them that they will not be able to understand these materials until they're 5. Show them what that is doing, how powerful those materials are, that they'll be memorizing their equations, their math facts, that they'll be able to know all the countries of the world, the capital cities even. I mean, that they're going to get to all that, division, fractions, all these things so effortlessly that they can learn it at those ages, but they won't be showing them those things until much later in traditional school, when it's harder for them to understand them. And if they have them here and wait, maybe your school only goes through primary, if it only goes to age 6, to help them to understand how well it prepares them for traditional school. and it starts to get in there and they start realizing, oh, wow, it's only going to get better and better. I always tell people that. I just keep saying it gets better and better and better. If you think your mind is blown now by what these children do, wait till they're 13 and you see what it's like for them and how different that is from what they would be getting in traditional school. So it's a battle that is very common all around. And that is what I have found to be the most effective. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have Nerissa saying, thank you so much. It's like attending crash or refresher course. So many nuggets of information are being shared. And she is noting all of them. Thank you, Nerissa, for giving this input. So anybody else who has any question to ask or anything to share with us? All right.
Yeah, I'm just seeing in the chat here. In the chat, I'm seeing somebody, it's Yasmin also talking about a child not able to read or write, but they forget that writing is not the only important thing. The practical life and the sensorial is very important. Yes. But also for them, I think to understand that where the practical and sensorial are prepped, which I think you're getting at, language is already happening. So I really love the sound game where we analyze the sounds and we talk about them. That is so huge. And to do a lot of the sound, preparing the hand, showing the parents all those things that are helping. And I used to, at our school, used to do that in little bits and pieces. So every time there was a conference, always started, I had the children leave their materials out in the room that they were working on that day. So when the parent came in for the conference, I would take them over and say, this is one thing your child was doing today, and that's something their friend was doing, and this is something that they're going to do next, and here's something someone else was doing that they used to do. And I would talk about them just for a moment and talk about what the purpose is of each of these things. So the parents start to realize there's so much more going on, and it just builds on itself. It makes it easier for you to explain why the child is running progression and trust you. Yeah, that you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You have a plan, and you're looking for the timing, the right moment that it will happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So good luck with that. That's so much fun.
Yeah.
So many fun things.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paula, for sharing your insights. Fantastic. I mean, I think all of us had amazing takeaways. I'm sure everybody is going with few notes, including me. I was also making few notes over here. And thank you for accepting my invitation and coming for this session. And, I'm feeling honored and really enjoyed hosting you today.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Well, you're a fabulous interviewer. I love your interviews with other people and the other things that you've posted. You're doing such wonderful things. And I really want to come there to India to see you and in person and to talk. So we will make that happen someday in the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you. Please keep reading the book and spreading it. Yeah, I hope that the book is helpful to your parents, that you can get people to read it, and that you can point out certain sections in it, that your teachers can read it together. I hope it can really be something you can use. So thank you. And thank you so much. Thanks for being with me. And thank you, Madhuri.
And thank you all of you for those who are in India, spending your night with us here, and all of you who have spent your weekend morning. Thank you for staying with us, and really appreciate your presence. And you all have a good weekend ahead. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.